Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we all wait for the big announcements from today's conference, which is going to start somewhere between 10 and 11. So I'm putting out some of my musings as I'm walking around. Have absolutely nothing to do with this conference, but have lots to do with geopolitical history. 2 points today I want to make. The first point is the English absolute hatred for Russia. And that hatred makes absolutely no sense. Not from a geopolitical standpoint. Absolutely no sense. Allow me to expand upon the concept. Both Russia and the UK are located at two ends of Europe. Two very different ends of Europe. So they don't share any borders. Let's begin with that. Borders usually make friction. As they say, fences are the best for keeping good neighbors. We don't have any fences because we don't have any borders. Additionally, both Russia and the UK are on the edges of Europe. So for both countries, it is optimal that there is no unified Europe, that there is no European unification, that Europe cannot go against either side. So you would think, considering trade between Russia and the UK started back in the early 1500s under Elizabeth the Great from the UK side, and under Ion Grozny, Ion Vasilievich IV Grozny, feared, not terrible, on the Russian side. In fact, Ion Grozny offered to marry Elizabeth the Great. So there's that little interesting fact in history, with her bad teeth included. As you can see, there's a lot of construction going on up and down Moscow, center of Moscow, rebuilding buildings, reinforcement, and this is a constant thing. So renovating new buildings. Walked us past some of the metal grinding. It's just getting too loud. So there's that one side of it. Why on earth would there be such conflict between Russia and the UK? Well, in his part is it's always from the side of the UK. There is the concept of the Great Game. Okay, so the UK has been paranoid that Russia was going to grab Afghanistan first and then walk its way over through the East Indies Company's lands, so the Indian colonies, which today encompass also Pakistan. Moscow in the summer. Russia in general, they really like to plant flowers everywhere, set flowers everywhere, so Russia's always very colorful in the summer and early fall. So there's the concept of the Great Game. Anybody that's read anything about geopolitics knows about the Great Game. There's only one little problem with the Great Game. If one reviews the historical record from the Russian side, and particularly it's out in the open now that we're living in a post-Soviet era, second generation of the post-Soviet era, one notices one thing very interesting. Because all the old Russian archives, foreign ministry archives got opened up. And what was noticed is the Great Game was a very one-sided affair. It was a British affair. The Russian side didn't even know there was a Great Game going on. Quite literally. There was never any intention on annexing India, or what's today Pakistan, which is also part of India. There was never any interest in taking over anything over there, as a matter of fact, or Afghanistan. Getting Afghanistan on Moscow's side was an interest, partially to stop the human trafficking First and foremost, the Russian settlers, and those living on the edge, which is the reason Russia even went into Central Asia. Khiva, which is today's Uzbekistan, was brought to heel because it was one of the last major slave markets from which slaves were sent very often either to the Persian Empire or to the Turkish Empire. Russia had crushed the Turkish slavery that was prevalent in the Black Sea area, in the Caucasus. This is Red Square. Came in from a different angle. So they're setting up the scaffolding for the end of August, where they have basically the battle of the marching bands from various militaries. Interesting to wonder if the Euros and the Americans are going to show up this year, because they have previously. I don't know if they did the last 2 years or not. And the British came with several bands, because they had the Scots had their own bands. So there's the great game, as I was saying. Very one-sided affair. The British, in their paranoia, imagine for themselves a great game. From the Russian side, there was never a great game. There was no interest in this great game, so nobody was playing it from the Russian side. But the British, absolutely paranoid. I don't know, was it inbreeding in the British elites, or too much cocaine or heroin? I don't know. Cocaine was legal back then, so was heroin. Don't know what, maybe too much brandy or too much gin, but they saw the great game everywhere, and they were always paranoid of Russia. A one-sided affair. Yeah, I hate my neighbor because my neighbor's trying to do something with me, when my neighbor's just paying attention to his own business and is just ignoring me. That's the level of this dispute, except they're not even neighbors. And it seems 300 years on, and the British cannot get it out of their heads. They're still trying to play the great game. They're no longer an empire. They're a second-class nation with a third-class military and a collapsing economy on a couple of islands. And they're still trying to play the great game, to which, by the way, they're using the Americans very effectively. They have since the early 1900s. And I think certain members of the American elites, including Trump, are sick and tired of it. And they want to get out from manipulation by London. And when London has been very effectively manipulating their politics for a very long time now. Yes, we do have a lot of tourists, and some tourists come from certain nations that have slightly different dress codes from ours. So anyways, there's that. There's the idiocy of the great game that the British apparently seem to still be playing. Except the muscle now is no longer the British Empire, which no longer exists. It doesn't even exist as a shadow empire like the French Empire continued to exist in Africa. Colonial empire just with black hands instead of white hands, which we're helping very quickly to remove in the Sahel region and expanding into sub-Saharan Africa in general. Help these people free themselves from French colonial rule. Well past one for all concepts that colonial rule supposedly ended. So there's that. And we will live and see how that goes. So the second concept of my two concepts was the biggest mistake of all for the whole world. A huge mistake that cost Europe its golden century, golden era. It cost Europe probably its very life, and it sure didn't help us any. And this was the idiocy of the German project. You see, until then, until 1883, and unification under the German Confederacy that pretty quickly became the German Empire, and Wilhelm I and Bismarck Until then, Germany was a subdivided entity in about 24 states. Most of these states were very tiny, some were medium, and a few larger ones, like Bavaria, for example, and Prussia. So anyways, as long as these states were divided, and you had also at that point, to a certain point, you had divided Italy that then reunified in the 1860s. But until, even with Italy in the south as a unified kingdom, as long as you had divided mass of kingdoms in the middle of Europe, you had several things going for you. One of those things was you didn't have a unified front in the middle of Europe that could wage a two-front war, move east, move west. You didn't have the German industry, the German population unified. They'd always be played by different powers. That gave a buffer between Eastern Europe, or in this case, the Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and in the west, the British and the French empires, and the nascent Italian Empire in the south. And of course, the Ottomans, who were the sick man and dying man of Europe. So you had that big plus. Additionally, because you had this buffer state in between for maneuvers and what have you, you didn't have a unified threat. So the French and the British were never allies. In fact, they spent an entirely long amount of time battling each other for any and all advantages. Plus, you throw in the Netherlands and their empire, a few others, the Spanish, and you get this point where nobody trusted anybody, but that also kept peace. Because as long as you didn't have any major alliances, and the British were busy fending off the, sorry about the wind noise, but and the British were busy fending off the French, you couldn't get a united front, and the globalists really had problems. They couldn't take over, they couldn't really get themselves through in any kind of control like they have now, which is why everything came around when the Germans unified. The whole European Union 1.0, we're on 2.0 right now, was Hitler's new European order, with Germany being the prime economy in a united Europe. Yeah, sounds familiar, doesn't it? So, as long as you had that, the Germans were just united. They were a buffer. They weren't a threat. So all these other players were viewing each other suspiciously, or could never be in cahoots with each other. And the British effort went just as much on trying to tame the French and the Netherlands as it went on anything else, like trying to destroy Russia. Let's not forget, the target of World War I wasn't just the Germans, it was also the Russian Empire from day one. So once the Germans were unified, of course everything changed, the balance changed completely, and the world wasn't safer from it. In truth, the world became much less safe, and many, many more problems occurred. And this is what we're living in right now. The World War I that was launched specifically because there was a Germany in the midst of all this. Let's remember, Germany unified in 1883. In 1914, 30 years later, we wound up with World War I breaking out. The safest we've ever been is when Germany was divided. Post-World War II. Unified Germany, and we get Merz, who's pushing for World War III. He's got war on the mind. He gets a blank BlackRock stare of what I can get, what I can do. This isn't a man that thinks about humans, even his fellow citizens. This is a man that thinks of profits, control, destruction, controlled destruction, and just being a parasite. This is what big bankers really are. Is parasites on humanity. Little banks, small banks, community banks, they have a very big role to play in any economy. Absolutely, I believe in that. Big finance is a parasitical organism. Good. Okay, walked past some of the construction because it was just getting too loud to be able to hear. So yeah. So obviously, third time around now, we're seeing the effect that a united Germany is incompatible with any kind of peace. And when the Germans unite, sooner than later, they get some kind of whacked out leader or group of leaders, because that's part of their elite, who insists on getting the marching bands going and going forward to doing what they consider great things. Basically plunging the world into another world war. Third time's a charm, right? No, it won't be. It'll probably result in the end of Germany, but these people don't seem to care. And enough Germans are brainwashed to follow whatever Fuhrer pops up. This little bad habit of the Germans. This is a monastery over here. That they continue to do this, as they've shown over and over and over and over again. So yeah, so that's what we're looking at. That, in my view, these are the two biggest geopolitical mistakes that were made. And there's me. Say hello, Stas. Hello, Stas. These are the two biggest geopolitical mistakes that have been made in the last 200 years. Yep. Me, personally, I'd probably say the next larger one was Russia backing the North instead of backing the Confederacy. But some people consider it otherwise. But that's my personal view. So that's my shout out to the South. So there. Let me know what you think. Agree with me, disagree with me. Give me some reasons. And we'll discuss. Cheers.